What I really like about God's creation is the beauty of the world.
If adults don't do something, I hear it's going to be a really hot planet.
It really is our future.
It's just taking care of our common home we all share.
About the earth, I feel that we need to protect it so future generations can live on it.
We're all in this together.
Praise to you, my Lord, through our sister, Mother Earth, who sustains and governs us. I'm Archbishop of Cincinnati, Dennis Schnurr, and I greet you with this ancient prayer from St. Francis of Assisi's Canticle of the Creatures. Pope Francis also used these words to call upon every person living on the planet to praise our Creator by caring for His earth, our common home. I call upon all of us to honor this gift of creation by acknowledging the urgency of our environmental challenges and committing to lasting solutions. In the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, many parishes, schools, and religious communities are increasing their stewardship of the earth. And our Archdiocesan Climate Change Task Force supports them through faith formation and energy efficiency programs, as well as advocating for greater environmental protections. It is my hope that Catholics and all people of goodwill will join our efforts. Together we can all do a little more to protect the earth, individually, in our workplaces, in our houses of worship, and as faithful citizens.
So the Archdiocese of Cincinnati began to raise the priority of its interest in caring for God's creation, and especially focusing on the issue of climate change. When God created everything, as Pope John Paul II said, he endowed every aspect of creation with its own integrity. That means independent from what we say creation's value is. God has placed His own imprimatur on every aspect of creation. That's why Genesis tells us this command to till and to keep creation. So with that motivation, we felt that the issue of climate change was of particular concern to the human species. What we pledge as an archdiocese is that we will do 5 things to help protect, to till, and to keep the earth in a responsible way. That is to pray, to learn, to assess, to act, and to advocate. And so over the course of the last 10 years or so, the Archdiocese has been organizing programs to bring us into prayer, to pray for the protection of God's creation, to educate the faithful and ourselves throughout the Archdiocese on what our church teaches, and to understand our responsibility and the dangers that we can pose to creation if we're not careful.
So the Climate Change Task Force it's about living out our faith to the fullest, to care for creation, God's gift to us. And so we as a task force do that through the 5 pillars of the St. Francis Pledge.
Well, on my own, I pray. I'm a firm believer we cannot do any of this without going deep into prayer and making sure that we are rooted in this, because this is tough stuff that we do, and people lose heart. If it's all about me, you don't last very long. If you really try to keep focused on what God is calling us to do and what the scriptures have called us and the church has called us, it helps sustain you.
As Pope Francis has said, everything is connected. So that means that everything I do affects everything, including creation. So the more that I can do to help creation with sustainable living, caring for the earth, then that's more of a connection I have with God, with my Catholic faith, even with Catholic social teaching.
And Catholic social teaching, especially since 1991, has directed us to care for our creation. And I, too, as many advocates on climate, realize that caring for the environment is a respect life issue.
Sustainability is not really a left-wing, right-wing issue. It's not really a conservative, liberal issue. It's a life issue. Everybody should be impacted and understand the meaning of what sustainability is and how it applies to them and their communities. It's really a life issue.
The St. Francis Pledge comes from the Catholic Climate Covenant, And the part of it that speaks to me a great deal is to learn. And I think it is really important that we open ourselves to what science has to say, to what faith has to say, and to recognize that they are integrally connected.
I remember the night Laudato Si was released. I was so moved by it. I started reading it at midnight, and I had a hard time getting through because I was crying. And it was just so inspiring. It was speaking science and in a language that was so understandable for everyone. As a climate change ecologist, I've been delighted by the reception of the document by the scientific community. For the scientific community was included in the writing. The consultation was broad internationally and very culturally inclusive, included people of faith and all of us. Pope Francis is calling all of us, people of faith and goodwill, to work together to achieve an integral ecology for the care of our common home and our future together.
Pope Francis, I think he's taken in Laudato Si an opportunity to articulate what has been the Church's teaching from the very beginning, from the earliest days on. He's given us a challenge and a call to not be complacent, but to actually work hard at being aware of creation, aware of what we must do to keep it going for ourselves and for the generations to come.
The Archdiocesan Climate Task Force is a great task force. I had the opportunity to go to a meeting there in October, and they do some great work throughout the communities. They're really getting going on awareness first and then action, so they're really doing a good job of promoting activities and promoting ideas that can help parishioners be more environmentally friendly. What they do is great work, and what we can do together is come together as an archdiocese and really tackle this issue through a lens of God and through a gratitude for all the gifts he's given us. So yeah, this task force, I encourage everyone to get involved. Go to a meeting if you can, or get involved in the newsletters, get involved in the activities that are occurring, and it's a great organization.
A wonderful example of Catholic commitment to living lightly on this earth is Earth Connection. A ministry of the Cincinnati Sisters of Charity, Earth Connection was founded by Sister Paula Gonzalez, a biologist and nationally recognized sustainability leader. Under the leadership of our Climate Change Task Force team members Sister C.J. Willie and also Sister Winnie Brubach, Earth Connection provides a wide variety of fascinating environmental programs. People from all over come to this visionary place of reflection and learning. Teachers bring students on field trips to enjoy sustainable gardening and to learn about solar and geothermal energy. Educators are offered in-classroom presentations and in-service sustainability workshops. Earth Connection is a gem to learn about caring for God's creation, to adults and kids alike.
Laudato Si is a wonderful articulation of the Church's teaching on the sacredness of all that is in creation, from the moment a person is conceived till natural death, and all the things that come into our life that we use that have been given to us in the world. The task force on climate change, I think, has been a great help. They've taken the work that the Pope has done and put it on an archdiocesan level. So they will help parishes and individuals within the parish become more aware of the needs of climate change, the needs of the earth. They will help you with different resources and programs and things that can come into the parish. The Laudato Si parishes, I think, is really a fine thing that's come up. We hope to be recognized as one between our rain gardens and many of the things that we've done in adding green elevator to our property, things like that, will be good awareness for other people. And the task force helps people come in those directions, accomplish those kinds of things.
We tell the kids and we talk to the kids about what's important with our environment and what God's message is, but also that we live that. And our children, my students, need to see that not only are we asking them to keep God's creatures preserved, but also to act as if that is the message that we're sending.
Within the past 5 to 7 years, because we've noticed a change in seasons, a change in flooding, a change in just the climate and the weather and what it's done to our environment. Just like a day like today, it is extremely hot. The sun seems to be a lot more prone for her to get sunburned than it would have been, as I say, when I was younger. So we've really paid attention to that in the last 5 to 7 years, I think.
I think of climate change as being more as happening over the years. If you look back in history, you see that there was a global cooling, and so you see that people call it global warming now, but it's the Earth, from my understanding, is going back to, it kind of changes over time, so it's going back to how it was. It's kind of stabilizing, from my understanding.
I started thinking about climate change for my 8th grade science project. We had to, for our final project, we had to come up with an alternative source of energy and do a report on it and discuss with other groups why our source of energy was better than the other options and more effective. And so my group focused on solar energy. I think it's definitely a problem that we need to attack head on, and I don't think we are taking enough measures to attack the problem. I think people are still caught up in the idea that it's not necessarily true, and they need to look beyond that and start to think about how it's going to affect our future and the way that humanity develops.
Children not only in my parish, but in my neighborhood, in my community, in my country, that we understand that if we don't take care of our land, if we don't take care of creation, that it doesn't leave anything for our children to be appreciative of. That taking care of God's creation is a part of providing a legacy for our children to also take hold of those tenets and also to express that and how they live out their faith as well.
How can we cultivate our prayer in harmony with creation, calling us to change? Care for creation is caring for God's people too. As we reduce the carbon pollution from our coal-fired utility plants and the emissions from our cars, we're reducing the asthma in our children. As we are reducing all of this carbon gas that goes into the atmosphere, it forms a blanket. And so it just kind of traps the heat.
And so when people say they're concerned about climate change, I think that they're not taking a big enough picture into mind, because the Earth changes over time and it happens slowly. And so I think that climate change is a big issue today, but I think people overreact to it.
Well, actually, I started thinking about it back in 1969 when I lived on the Gulf Coast and dealt with Hurricane Camille as it went through and destroyed the coast. That had me interested in nature and the planet and time, the life of the planet. And I've been that way ever since, modern community. I like facts. I don't like opinions much.
A long time ago, God gave us this beautiful, wonderful earth. If you think about the Garden of Eden and the perfection of that, every resource that we needed was there in the Garden of Eden. We just didn't have to mess it up. And so now, ever since then, we've been trying to play catch up. We really have to understand our role in being a good steward of nature. When we take into account the unintended consequences of our actions that have occurred in the past, perhaps we were ignorant of certain things. Right now, we know better. We've been educated, we understand things a little bit more than we did in the past. In the beginning, we understood that we could have fire and wood, and we could receive warmth, we could cook. As technologies started to develop and we began to explore this planet a little bit more, obviously we got into coal and to oil, and those resources really helped us in some ways mature, and in other ways start to really not pay attention to what the general impacts of those resources would be. Today, we have a series of technologies that is using God's creation to help us solve our energy issues without the pollution that some of the fossil fuels have as well. For instance, as many of you know, solar and wind, hydro. Now we're getting to other kinds of technologies like biomass on a larger scale. We're getting to algae to oil, which really begins to unpack or break apart that struggle of an oil-consumed machinery and that sustainability issue. When you think about what algae can do, it actually pulls carbon from the atmosphere. We break it apart, extract the lipids, and use that as oil. That as a resource provides much more BTUs per drop of oil than fossil fuel oil does.
I believe wholeheartedly that it is in fact a problem, that the burning of fossil fuels and the way that we are currently living is completely unsustainable, and that we will eventually run out of resources. And well, I'd really like my kids to see a polar bear, and I feel that would be truly It's really a tragic world if your kids can only look at a polar bear on the pages of some old outdated Nat Geo book.
In our Catholic ethic, and a virtue that I think is shared by many faith traditions, is this virtue of prudence. It's not the most exciting word, right? But what it means is something very profound, and I think it's a virtue that can guide how we look at complex issues like climate change. And what prudence basically says is that in situations, even if we do not have 100% absolute full knowledge of what is going to happen in a particular circumstance, to not act could be hugely detrimental to the life of the planet, to ourselves, to generations to come. Then it's our responsibility to act.
Y la razón de por qué tuve que venirme para acá, para Cincinnati,
I have to live here to Cincinnati,
pasó un huracán
is
fuertísimo
because of the very strong hurricane
en Puerto Rico,
in Puerto Rico.
y pues prácticamente perdí todo,
And I
la
basically
casa,
lose everything, my home.
no hubo electricidad,
We didn't have electricity,
no agua
no water,
y escaseó mucho la comida.
and the food was very scarce.
Tristeza porque estoy sola aquí con mis niños, con mis dos niños de 6 años y 9 años.
Sadness because I'm just here with my two sons.
Y
One is 6 and the other one is 9 years old.
Y mi familia, pues la tengo, mis padres, mi madre, mis hermanas están en Puerto Rico.
And my families, my parents, my sisters, my brothers, they're all in Puerto Rico. ¿Qué es lo que piensas acerca del clima que está cambiando tan extremadamente a nivel mundial?
Bueno, para mí es preocupante ya que tengo dos niños que son alérgicos, son asmáticos y entre el frío, el calor y en todo lo que está pasando con el clima, pues me preocupa bastante sobre lo que está pasando por el clima.
For me, it's very worrisome because I have two children that they suffer from asthma, and all of these changes in climate really worry me.
So the sign is Pacific Climate Warriors logo, and Pacific Climate Warriors is a group of people from many different nations in the Pacific Islands who stand up against fossil fuel industries, trying to make the world aware of what is happening to their islands. There are 4 flags represented here, Kiribati, Tokelau, Tuvalu, and the Marshall Islands. All of those Marshall Islands are pretty much slated to disappear within the next 20 to 30 years.
I know that people who do live near coastal shorelines probably are or should be concerned about rising sea levels due to climate change.
I can't think of anything more urgent than for us to get along with each other and listen to sensible things like scientists are telling us.
All of us could do a little bit every day to take care of our planet, perhaps have strategies at home, kind of to recycle, to, for example, sometimes even using paper, sometimes using paper in both sides, or go to the supermarket and take our own bags, compose at home. Everybody could do a little bit, and then if all do that, it adds up. All of us want the best for our children, and of course I want for my daughter a planet in which she could have a good environment, she could have access to food, access to clothing, access to home, but we need to care for our environment and our planet in order for our children and their children to have access to a nice world in which they have access to their basic needs at least.
We try to do the small things that we can do to reduce our carbon footprint. We try to eat meatless. We try at sometimes during the week. We try to reduce our carbon footprint, be aware of the cars that we're driving, use public transportation when we can use public transportation. But it's baby steps really when you think about what we as a society at large can do in terms of reducing carbon emissions.
Environmentalism shouldn't be a political issue because we have one common home. We have one gift that God gave us, and that's the environment. You know, that's our earth, our precious earth, and our precious air and water. Really, as human beings, we should want to and have that heart to protect and want to have those generations after us have a viable ecosystem and viable earth. So we've politicized the whole issue, and I think it's a grave error in our society to politicize this issue. It should be bipartisan, in my opinion, it should be a bipartisan, unanimous agreement to want to protect our Earth. And I encourage everyone to do what they can, do their parts to protect our precious Earth.
How do we assess our actions and use tools like a carbon footprint or an energy audit to find ways that we can improve?
So carbon footprint is an important term because it gives us a way to assess how much we ourselves are personally contributing to these climate changing forces that are in our planet. So it's a measure of how much carbon we ourselves are personally responsible for putting out in this planet. There's actually calculators online that can be used, websites that you can visit and enter a bunch of data, and they basically all work the same way. They ask you questions about how you live your everyday life and what you do. For example, they will ask you, how many miles do you drive to work? Where do you get your food from? How hot do you keep your house? All these things affect how much energy you actually use. Carbon is associated with that because of the power plants that produce electricity, and because in a car you use an internal combustion engine and it outputs carbon dioxide, which is a climate changing gas. What these calculators do is they take all this information, put it together, and then tell you how many pounds of carbon dioxide that you yourself are personally responsible for putting out in a given year.
We're a parish that recently merged 4 parishes into an urban environment, and taking a look at the footprint of the parish, also understood that we had to reduce our utility bills. And one of the ways to do that is to go green. And what ways could we do that? So part of the staff attended the task force energy summit that they had at Good Shepherd, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, if I can recall that right. And we've gone on to take a look at changing lights and doing whatever we can, and having our local energy company come out and do a study for us to see how we could reduce that footprint, at least in those facilities that we own.
Communities United for Action works with low and moderate income communities that doesn't have the means or the self-esteem to take matters in their own hand. And what Communities United for Action do is to help the community become empowered by coming together as one and looking at the issue, not blaming each other, but looking at what is the real issue of the problem that is happening.
My children are very important to me in terms of climate action because I see our world as a place that they are going to be inheriting. And so it's really important that they get the same type of world that we had and have right now. If we work towards sustainability, and what that means to me is that it's what the needs that my generation that this planet is helping our generation fill are going to be there for the next generation, that their needs will also be fulfilled as well. In order to do that, I think it's important to teach my kids about the importance of our planet, about the importance of our climate, about the importance of what God has done for us. For example, knowing that God made everything and God saw that it was good, and that we are stewards of this planet is really important for them, I think, to help them understand. Because that way, hopefully, they can go forward and realize that we have to care for this planet.
I want to be able to help take care of the earth because I have children in my family and children that I work with, and I want to be able to have a healthy environment for them to grow up in.
And in fact, children everywhere. What kind of a world are they going to grow up in? So this is stewardship, stewardship of the earth, but taking care of our families. That's what it's really about, taking care of our families, which means our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and your children and grandchildren, making sure they have a home to grow up in, the home that God gave them. So that's a big motivator.
We recycle. We try to be very careful about living on a farm, not to have open fires. We pay attention to the types of chemicals and things that are being used on our fields and on our plants. We're trying to participate and support environmental groups and environmental projects teach her about nature coming to a park like this. It's important to always leave an area you enter better than what you left it in. So that's something we try to teach our children and help promote to others, because sometimes it's just a lack of education. People don't care, so they pollute, they burn, they do things that they aren't realizing could have harmful effects down the line.
I do a couple things environmentally during the MLB season to try to eliminate some waste and whatnot. One of the easiest things I do is just carry a glass bottle around with me everywhere instead of having it drop and break. It has some protection around it, so it's glass, and it just saves so much plastic waste by you just pop it off, drink some water, and you don't have to use a new plastic bottle every day. And then another thing I do, my wife got this for me back in 2014 because I kept on having waste and I kept on feeling bad about throwing away like styrofoam or plastic to-go boxes. So she got this meal kit for me, and it's collapsible. It has like a bunch of different features. So it has a utensil lock. You can lock in your fork and knife and spoon, and then you can put your meals in there. You can take it to go. You can eat it. I eat at the field when there's not reusable dishware available. So
I think it is extremely important as we look towards the future, towards the next generation, that we provide an environment that they can live in healthily and happily. The United Nations definition of sustainability is to live within the means of our own generation, but also to leave behind us a sustainable world for others. And I think as we look at the children of today, it's a little scary for them to look at the world we're leaving for them, because there doesn't seem to be a collaborative action on the part of everyone, or a realization on the part of everyone that our lifestyle is simply not sustainable.
Sustainability is about living within your means today while allowing future generations to do the same. It's really looking out for the born, the unborn, so that as they mature, they have their own quality of life that is equal to ours. So the Climate Change Task Force is really designed to help parishes and individuals really connect the dots between faith and sustainability. It's an outreach and education program that can help parishioners really understand how to live more sustainably and allow to help educate their families to do the same.
I'm a father of a 2-year-old, and that's given a real urgency to this work for Care for Creation. It's also given a new joy to the work because I get to do it with my son. I want to see a world where kids like him, and kids all over the world really, can enjoy the gifts of creation, can enjoy health and well-being. We've already seen signs of climate change in our city, heat waves, major storms that do impact the lives of people, the lives of children, the lives of families. And if we don't continue to address them, those issues could worsen. And as a father, I want to see the best for our children.
The next step that viewers can take to reach out to the task force is to call the local Archdiocesan office or to send them an email. They are happy to help you, give you any tips, to send presenters to your parish, to answer any questions that you have, and to help you get started. Even if you have just a small idea, they're willing to help you move forward with it.
Something a lot of people might ask is, when you work on issues like trying to address environmental degradation or the seemingly overwhelming challenge of climate change, where do you find joy? Where do we find joy in this work? But I have to say, working through the Climate Change Task Force, working with parishioners who are just passionate about these kinds of concerns, about wanting to do something good for the earth, and just knowing that we're part of a global Catholic community that has this consistent ethic about how we view creation, that is hugely joy-giving. It really brightens my day to know that I'm a part of something bigger, part of this circle of concern that we have that embraces literally the entire earth, right? And that's our mission. And to share in that with others together is truly a joy. And I have to say that the folks on our Climate Change Task Force are very upbeat, life-giving people. They're the kind of people you want to hang around with if you're trying to protect the earth, right? So we look for those kinds of folks to bring joy into this work.
We give thanks for the gift of creation, and our commitment to respect all human life obliges us to safeguard it for all peoples, especially for future generations yet to be born. Thank you for all you do to protect the earth and all those who depend upon it. One person at a time, we can better care for our common home. Through our actions, let us join all God's creatures in giving praise.